So what I'd like to try to do is explore the concepts, methodologies, and the impacts, potential impacts of participatory and ethnographic filmmaking as an approach for supporting positive social change within marginalised and disadvantaged communities. The things I would like to get across to you are, first of all, let's try to recognise some different models of communication. We're filmmakers, it comes from mass communication theory, mass media theory. Let's recognise some models and think about how they apply to us in our own practice. I want us to consider our positioning as filmmakers to our subjects. And this is extremely important, and I'll come back to that heavily later on. I'm going to then present 3 case studies to you from my own practice, and then we'll invite some participant feedback and have some questions as well, and a discussion. So let's start off with this model of mass media or mass communication. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with this type of underlying theory of mass media. It was developed by a guy called Harold Lasswell in the 1940s. And basically, his idea is who is saying what, in which channel, to whom, and with what effect. And you may have heard of this mass communication model being called the hypodermic needle model, because it's injecting a message into a community. Or the bullet theory, shooting a message into a community. But people became quite disillusioned with that model of mass communication for bringing about social change, because actually that type of approach brought about very little change. And people said, well, we must have a two-way mechanism. We must have a way of finding out what happens when we put messages into communities. And so this idea of the communication chain came about. Well, okay, but what people really did was just to take that linear mass communication idea, add in effects and add in feedback and turn it into a chain. And some people said, well, no, that's two-way communication. But actually, when you look at it, it's not two-way communication at all. It's still a unidirectional flow of information. And now adding in feedback actually puts the source in a much stronger position. The source could be an NGO, it could be a government, it could be a business, whatever you like. A source is sending a message through a channel to an audience to create effects, and now they're gathering feedback to see what effects has been created. Who has the power here? The source has the power. They can manipulate the message or the channel to further enhance the impact that they want to see within their recipient group, within their community. And of course, this is a model of mass communication that we see used in advertising today, of course, and in propaganda and other types of communication like that. This lady is really important to us when we start talking about communication for social change. The term development communication was first coined by this lady in 1971, and this is Nora Cubrell from the Philippines. And she's often been referred to as the mother of development communication. And actually that term, development communication, became formalized as an academic discipline based on her work. Development communication refers to the use of communication to facilitate social development. So all the NGOs and INGOs that have been working in Nepal over the decades have all been using development communication in one way or another. And there are many different types of development communication. As a catch-all umbrella term, development communication continues to be applied in practice for things like information dissemination, with information that's related to development issues, education perhaps, behaviour change. You may have heard of things like social marketing, advocacy, social mobilisation. All these are nuances of communication, and they all come under this catch-all term of development communication in some way. And there are also vastly different models of communication which are employed that use sometimes top-down models of communication, like the first diagram that we looked at there, and what I'm going to call horizontal approaches, which we're going to unpack more in this session, which is not about a powerful source sending messages at people. It's about the horizontal dialogue that communication creates within society, within communities. And really that's what Cabral was stating, what she was trying to get at. Development communication for her was not a tool of control, but it's about social equality. And Cabral in 2001, she defined development communication as the art and science of communication linked to a society's planned transformation from a state of poverty to one of dynamic socioeconomic growth that makes for far greater equity and the larger unfolding of individual potential. Now, there is some aspects of that definition which are still focused on economic growth and so on, and as somebody that is coming from a capitalist country, I would question a lot of the premises of whether growth actually results in sustainable development in any way at all. But let's leave that aside for the moment. But that last part, the unfolding of individual potential, that's a very different type of concept to the previous models of communication we were looking at. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, on the other side of the world from Cabral, another critical pedagogy was evolving in Latin America, that of Paulo Freire. Anyone familiar with Paulo Freire's work? Some people nodding, yeah. Paulo Freire was a Brazilian educator and a philosopher who supported marginalized and disadvantaged people to improve their life situation. Freire's idea of critical consciousness reinforced processes of problem solving within communities. The emancipation from oppression is pursued through the awakening consciousness of one's own situation within community and society, and it's driven by self-actualizing actions for change. So it's not about someone sending messages at you, it's about realizing and self-actualizing your own place within your community, within your society. And Paulo Freire has had a huge influence on my own practice and my filmmaking work. You may be familiar with his seminal book, really, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, in which he explains in detail this concept of critical consciousness. Critical consciousness being a state where we continually reflect on our situation in relationship to other people, and we engage in dialogue for mutual benefit. And why am I talking about Paulo Freire? Well, Freire recognized that this state of being, this state of critical consciousness, is really hard to achieve. We don't often recognize it, its importance, its significance. We don't usually seek it. On a collective community level, usually some sort of catalyst is required to instigate this process of critical consciousness in a facilitated process, certainly initially. And this is where I would like to suggest that we can frame participatory filmmaking for social change. So instead of focusing on communication as a noun, as a product, as a film, as a drama, or whatever, we must focus on communication and filmmaking as a verb. It's an action, it's a process. Participatory filmmaking then can facilitate us to investigate our own situation through self-reflection, listening to others, engaging in dialogue with others, developing new understandings of our situation and awareness, and ultimately, it can help us to change our own behaviour towards ourselves, to other people, and I would also say to other living things and to the planet at large. So the characteristics of participatory filmmaking help in the development of a community's cultural identity. To act as a vehicle for participant or citizen self-expression, to facilitate problem articulation, to unpack problems and learn about them, to serve as a tool for the diagnosis of a community's problems, and also then to lead to collective action. And now these are grand themes, these are grand aims, and I'm trying to, or I will try to give you some concrete case study examples in a moment of how some of these things, some of these ideas can actually be implemented and actualized within real life communities and societies. An early model of participatory communication was proposed back in 1982 by a person called Thunberg. And it's called the spiral of interaction. And straight away you can see that model is quite different in concept to the other models of mass communication we looked at the start of this talk. There are 4 functions of communication which are identified in this model, and you can see them laid out at the bottom there. The expressive function. Individuals and groups express themselves in order to create an identity for themselves. The social function. By communicating together, people create a sense of community and strengthen that sense of community. The information function. Through communication, individuals can share information with each other and thereby increase their own knowledge and collectively the knowledge of others within their community. And then the control activation function. Communication leads to joint action or collective action that is intended to modify the local environment in some way and improve the situation of individuals and their groups and their communities. Open also then offers us further thoughts about the participatory communication approach. And he gives us 3 principles here. So, first of all, the entry point of our communication is the specific realities and problems of local groups, which are often rooted in rural subsistence, in poverty, and also perhaps a lack of organizational capacity. It's characterized by these horizontal communication processes that motivate people and mobilize them to change themselves and their own situation. And that process can occur through communication networks at the local level, communication initiatives at the local level. And the main criteria of success of communication interventions are the degree of participation and action by non-privileged groups in decision making. And that's almost the opposite of what we looked at in those models in the beginning. Okay, the power has absolutely changed its location within this type of communication. Let's just step sideways then and come to some approaches to filmmaking that are not necessarily drawn from development theory, as the models I've presented so far, but some that come from film theory and filmmaking theory. And I want to talk about ethnographic films just briefly. Participatory filmmaking and ethnographic filmmaking is my own practice. ethnography is generally described as a study of peoples and cultures, with their customs and their habits and their mutual differences, of course. And it's a dimension of anthropology, which is the study of human societies. So ethnographic film, then, is a way of documenting and investigating people and their cultures. And I would also argue that animals and the landscape can be explored in film with an ethnographic mindset as well. Anthropology meets zoology. One of the examples I'm going to show you from my own work focuses on animals. And then we move into the area of anthrozoology, actually. The author Haider makes a very strong case for resisting the temptation to try to define ethnographic film as an absolute, but rather to look for various attributes or dimensions that affect ethnographicness in film. And I think that's a really nice way of going about things. We can go down a cul-de-sac or into a dead end by trying to find definitive definitions about lots of things, where in fact we would be much better off trying to think about the characteristics of something which make it ethnographic in principle. Okay, some of these principles then. We immerse ourselves into the setting in the community, or the person's life as the subject. We build a relationship to the point where our presence no longer affects the way people behave. Let me say that one again. When we're making ethnographic films, as soon as you turn up anywhere with a camera, people will inherently behave differently. Even though they don't mean to, they'll play up to the camera a little bit, do things differently. You need to immerse yourself over a long period of time so that your presence in a community is sort of taken for granted. You're not a novelty anymore. And slowly people then will start to get back to the things that they have to do in their life to survive, if we're talking about marginalised and disadvantaged communities. And once you build that type of relationship with people and you are sort of become part of that community, then you can start to film things in an authentic way. Meaning, what people do are the same things they would do if you weren't there yourself. Okay? That's easy to say, but these are difficult things to bring about as a filmmaker. So longevity of engagement with and in the subject and their environment is absolutely essential. And we can break down ethnographic film into 3 subcategories as well. Direct cinema, which is non-interventionist. The filmmaker remains unseen and detached from events, and the film has no commentary. So many direct cinema films are shot with a camera that's locked off, because even the movement of a camera starts to imply the filmmaker's presence, doesn't it? So a lot of direct cinema films shot with a locked off camera where the action just happens within the front of the lens. And you minimize your presence as the filmmaker as far as you possibly can. Now, of course, you'll say, well, as soon as you point a camera at something, you're making decisions. Of course you are. But you try to minimize your interpretation of something artistically as much as possible. And you're simply just trying to document what is happening in that community in a non-interventionist way. And then we have observational cinema, which de-emphasizes persuasion to give a sense of what a given situation is like, but the filmmaker's presence might be more obvious, and the film may even incorporate some interviews. So when I say de-emphasizes persuasion, as a filmmaker, you're not taking a poetic approach. You're not crafting an artwork through your film that is loaded with your own artistic expression. You're still trying to give a sense of what a place is like authentically without your artistic interpretation in it, but your presence as the filmmaker might be slightly more obvious. So your choice of shots and the way you cut a sequence together that's okay, that can be there, because you are presenting what you think is the important parts of the subject that's in front of you. And you might incorporate interviews into observational cinema to give an extra dimension to the information that the person watching your film is able to take on board. And then we come to cinema verite, and cinema verite is translated as truthful cinema. The term cinema verite, Jean Rouch from France, if you're familiar with Jean Rouch's filmmaking. Truthful cinema, and this is the interaction between the filmmaker and the subject, and that interaction is acknowledged. So we quite often see the filmmaker actually, as a documentary maker, placing themselves into the film. And it's their interaction with the subject matter and the subjects of their film. That could be people, it could be animals, it could be landscape. But the filmmaker's interaction with the subject matter is much more apparent in the film. And actually, these three types of approaches, in different ways, have been evident in the films that I've been watching and my colleagues have been watching over the last month or so, the submissions that have been made to this film festival. And some of the discussions that we have been having as a jury on the film submitted relate to some of these underlying principles. Maybe I can talk more about that at another day, Saroj, when we come to that. So, ethnographic filmmaking. So, I've presented some different models there. I presented some very grand concepts about changing society, or people using film as a self-reflective tool to change themselves and to change their life situation. Let me try and give some specific examples and some context to that. So, as a development communication practitioner and an ethnographic documentary filmmaker, I seek to work with marginalised, disadvantaged, and what I'm calling declining peoples and cultures. When I say declining peoples and cultures, I mean those parts of our cultural heritage which is slowly ebbing away and is disappearing slowly from our countries and our communities. Sometimes our memories even, perhaps. So, declining peoples and their cultures, animals in the environment, promoting discussion and dialogue around issues which directly affect them. So I seek, let me just repeat that, seek to engage, to promote discussion and dialogue around issues which directly affect marginalised and disadvantaged or declining people in some way. And I periodically amend the way I describe myself and my work as I learn through life. But this is the definition I sort of put down on paper for this workshop. I work locally and globally with communities and social development organisations using participatory methods or ethnographic methods. And if you want to, you can find out more about my work at my website, marginalvoices.org. I should stress from the outset that as a development communication practitioner and ethnographic and documentary filmmaker, I work in slightly different ways. Every project I've ever worked on is unique and it's bespoke. It's slightly different to any other that I've worked on. And one of the key concepts about differing approaches is my positioning in relation to the community or the issue at the centre of that engagement. And I like to think of this on a spectrum. So let me just explain this concept for a moment. So I've got the community or the issue at the centre of the engagement on this spectrum from internal to external. And that internal to external is where I am positioning myself as the filmmaker. So, can you read that? Is it legible to you or not? I'll read it out anyway. This presentation, by the way, I have exported as a PDF and given to the committee so they can make it available to you through their website, and you can go back and look at some of these links in your own time. So on the external side, I've got something like a news report there, and I'm not talking about an investigative documentary that is factual-based, news-based. I'm talking, those short, sharp clips about the news where something's happened and a reporter turns up and gives an interpretation of what's happening, 2 minutes long on the news, and then it's gone. And that is, of course, the presentation of facts through an editorial lens. And we need to be aware that the news has a very strong editorial perspective on it. Then we come to expository, and expository is a term coined by Bill Nichols. Anyone familiar with Bill Nichols' modes of documentary filmmaking? So another important person to look up, maybe, looking at different approaches to filmmaking. So the expository approach, and the expository approach is when we know the documentary we want to make. We know what the story is. We know the message we want to convey through our documentary. We know what the outcome is going to be. And so we go out and we decide who we're going to interview to put that story together. So it's a construction job. We go out and we get the pieces of the jigsaw, and then we construct our story by putting those jigsaw pieces together. And quite often, we then put a narration over the top of it, a voiceover. And expository is often talked about in the context of the voice of God. This narrator, which is telling us things that we are supposed to just accept and not challenge. And that happens so much in documentary making. And so these things are at the external end, where we as filmmakers, we're not really engaging with that subject matter particularly. Right? We're coming at it from an external perspective. Then we move down in the middle here to investigative documentary making. And this is where we sense that there is a really good story somewhere. We've heard of something, or we know a family, or we know a person, or a situation, or a landscape that's changing in some way. It could be the formation of glacial lakes in the Himalayas at the moment because of melting glaciers and so on. We sense that there's a really good story there, but we're not sure exactly what it is or where it might take us, but it's worth investigating as a filmmaker, so we take a hunch. And okay, where are we going to start? Who are we going to interview first? Maybe who are we going to talk to first? So we start the process, and then that leads to somebody else, and we go and talk to them, or we go to a different place, and slowly the story starts to unfold for us in an investigative way. So the verb in this is really investigation. We investigate through the process of filmmaking, and ultimately we hope that we have some sort of narrative which is engaging to our viewer. And that narrative doesn't have to be a strong linear narrative. It can be quite impressionistic and atmospheric about a situation or about a space. That's also narrative, isn't it, in a different way. And then we come towards the end where most of my work is focused. So ethnographic filmmaking. In ethnographic filmmaking, I've already said one of the key principles is engagement with your subject matter over a long period of time. So the verb that I have here is immersion. We immerse ourselves into that situation for a long period of time till we can start to film in an ethnographic way that is a genuine reflection of the situation that we're in. And then right down on the left-hand side here we have participatory filmmaking. And participatory filmmaking is where we cease to be the filmmaker ourselves and we facilitate the process of filmmaking for other people. And we support other people to investigate their own situation through the process of filmmaking. I talked earlier on about development communication. Participatory development communication doesn't just have to use film, of course. It could use drama, it could use songwriting, storytelling, creative writing, any of those other media. But we're focused on film at the moment. So I'm talking about participatory filmmaking. We facilitate other people to explore their own situation and then maybe to use their film, if it actually comes out in a sort of a tangible way, to use that as a way of engaging in dialogue with other people. And sometimes those other people might be within their own community, who are maybe gatekeepers to change or oppressors of them and others in some way. And sometimes it might be people who are outside of their immediate community to engage in a dialogue. So that's participatory filmmaking. And what I'd like to do now is to give you 3 case studies, quite brief case studies. 1 investigative, 1 ethnographic, and then 1 participatory. And they are all primarily from Nepal, actually. So, investigative filmmaking. This is a project called Disability and Development. The aim of this project was to help young people in the UK and in Ireland to have a broader worldview and a deeper understanding of the issues affecting other young people around the world, so that as they grow into adults and become responsible members of society, not just nationally but internationally and globally, and take on important jobs or whatever path they find in life, they do so with a greater understanding of global issues and not just with a narrow Western focused mindset. So this project was funded by UK Aid and coordinated in partnership with 5 other disability organisations. And the project explored the interconnections between disability and development, and especially disability and poverty. If you are living in poverty, you are much more likely to suffer a disability in your life, either physical or mental or emotional. And if you have a disability, you're much more likely to slip into poverty. The connections between disability and poverty are incredibly strong. Interconnected, absolutely. So I made 7 films travelling around the world. And those 7 films explored the impacts of disability on young people's lives and explored the causes. How had young people become disabled? And then it unpacked their situation. 7 films. 1, Agent Orange victims in Vietnam. Children suffering brain damage at birth, genetic defects because of Agent Orange. Are you familiar with Agent Orange in Vietnam? Agent Orange was a chemical called dioxin used by America during the Vietnamese War to kill the foliage so that the Viet Cong had nowhere to hide. Great, but it's incredibly toxic to human beings. It stays in the soil and the water sources for years and years and years. It creates gene mutations that get passed from one generation to the next and to the next, disappear and then reappear in generations to come. So, Agent Orange in Vietnam, malnutrition in Ethiopia, brain damage in Bolivia and Tanzania. Bolivia and Tanzania, under-resourced health services where women giving birth did not have the proper facilities and resources, and children were born with brain damage because of those lack of facilities. Spinal injury in Nepal. Girls falling off of the terraces, cutting grass and whatever. And then earthquake victims in Haiti. And then in Ireland, a visual impairment, a girl born with glaucoma at birth. So these films, about 10 minutes each, they were embedded into a curriculum-linked resource, 24-page learning resource aimed at post-primary or secondary schools. And teacher training was provided with this resource, and the films were embedded into these active learning sessions. So you can see here the different activities for young people to do around the films. And one of the sessions, for example, looked at the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and used one of these films as the starting point to unpack an understanding about that UN convention, for example. So I'm going to just play you a clip from this film. I think it's about 4 minutes long, just to give you a sense of this type of work.
घरमा बसेको भएदेखि त हुर्जेरै जाँदैन। पहिलो कुरो एक ठाउँमा जले उचालेर खाटमा राख्दै खाटमा, भुइँमा राख्दै भुइँमा, जहाँको त्यही भइन्थ्यो, केही गर्न सक्दैन थियो र सक्दैन पनि। त्यहाँ अब वातावरण नै छैन, गाउँको स्थिति अब पाहाडमा भएपछि त्यस्तै हुर्जेरै जाँदैन। अनि अब पकाउन सहयोग, आमा बाबाहरूलाई सहयोग गर्न त कसरी सहयोग गर्थेँ र मैले अब हुर्जेरमा बसेर अब गाउँ घाँस काट्न जाने कुरो भएन, मेला जाने कुरो भएन, घरमा हुर्जेर बुढ्दैन, खाना बनाउन पनि सम्भव छैन। हुर्जेर बुढ्ने वातावरण भएको भए खाना यताउता पनि हुन्थ्यो, तर त्यो पनि छैन। केही पनि गर्न सक्दैन थियो घरमा त। त्यही बस्यो, खायो, पकाएर दिएछ खायो, नदियो भोगेपछि त्यस्तै गरेर रोएरै बित्थ्यो होला सायद जिन्दगी। अहिलेको यहाँ त म एकदमै खुसी छु र अब जस आफूलाई हुर्जेर एक्सेस ठाउँ छ, यहाँ चाहिँ सकिन्छ। आफैले हुर्जेर एक्सेस ठाउँ हुनु पर्यो पहिलो त। अनि ठाउँ भएपछि आफूले पानी बोक्ने, खाना बनाउने, लुगा धुनेदेखि लिएर आफै आफ्नो काम आफै गरेर अब जस पछि गर्ने कार्यहरू सबै जब गरेर आफ्नो जीवन पाल्न सकिन्छ, सक्छु ज। गाउँमा भएको भए त्यो स्थिति सक्छु भन्ने आँट गर्नै सकिन्थेन। जस अहिले त कलेजमा म्यानेजमेन्ट सब्जेक्ट लिएर पढिरहेको छु कि भविष्यमा जस अफिस म्यानेजमेन्ट भएर एउटा अफिसमा राम्रो काम गरेर र गाउँघरमा जस डिजाबलले केही पनि गर्न सक्दैन, यस्तो यिनीहरू भनेको हामीले अरूले दिएर खाने हो भन्ने भएको ती जनताहरूलाई चेतना फैलाउनु देखाउनु छ कि मैले पनि डिजाबलले पनि केही गर्न सक्छ, पढेर ठाउँ पाए, अवसर पाए, उनीहरूले पनि अरू एबलभन्दा कमी हुँदैन भन्ने कुरा तिनीहरूलाई म देखाउन चाहन्छु, सक्छु जस्तो।
So this story of Lakshmi was intercut with a story of a girl called Anita who's living in the mid-hills, who is basically housebound because obviously she can't use a wheelchair in that situation. It's investigative filmmaking, right? It's my engagement with young people and their families and how that has led to a story emerging. I worked through NGOs who had a long history of engagement with all of the children in all of the films. And the purpose of the project was explained to young people and their families. They were given time to think about this, if they wanted to tell their story or not, and if they did want to tell their story, what would they like to show? How would they like to be seen? And all of the young people suggested things from their daily lives that they thought were important. So there's elements of participation in it, but it's not a participatory film in that sense. And ultimately, as the filmmaker, I have all the control over how that material is actually edited, shot and edited, and then used. But I would suggest that my investigative filmmaking is flavoured very much by my participatory and ethnographic work. Now, I ask people just to go about their normal daily life, and I try and then just work gently around them. I don't intervene, I don't ask people to do anything or to redo anything. And furthermore, I try to let the pictures tell the story and only supplement it with interview when it's necessary. A second example here then. So this is now an example of ethnographic filmmaking. And this work called Brick Mule explored the use of film ethnography as an action research methodology which is based on Paulo Freire's principles, where in this case Nepali communities whose lives and livelihoods are heavily dependent on working equines, and their equines I would say, engaged in participatory ethnographic filmmaking as part of ongoing activities by project partners that was seeking transformation in working equine welfare. So we're talking about mules primarily here. But improved well-being of working mules also equates to economic stability, greater economic stability of equine-only communities. And the project involved two stages. So I undertook ethnographic filmmaking over the course of a whole year. I started just northeast of Delhi in a town called Meerut, where the mules that work in Nepal are actually bred and reared. From there they go to a huge annual equine fair at Barabanki, 5,000 to 7,000 animals bought and sold every year. Traders from Nepalganj go down to Barabanki, stay for a week to 10 days, buy up animals, walk them for 4 days back to Nepalganj. They stay in Nepalganj. Barabanki is in October time. They stay in Nepalganj until December. And then when the brick making season starts in the Kathmandu Valley, they travel on truck to the Kathmandu Valley until the monsoon starts, May, June time. And they might do that type of seasonal work for 4, 5, 6 years or so. And quite often mules will then be sold as pack animals in the high mountains. And sometimes they might cut out the brick factories and go straight as pack animals into the high mountains. And I followed the journey to Arket and then tracked up the Budigandaki to the base of Manaslu. It resulted in a 64-minute observational ethnographic film. So this is me engaging with communities at different parts of the project. The top pictures and the one on the left is actually before any filming took place. This is just engaging with communities, building up a relationship. And the bottom right picture there is in Nepalganj. This is some of the mule's life in Nepalganj. When I went to Nepalganj, I spent many hours, days just sitting in the tea shop actually. And slowly people asked me, what was I doing? Why was I there? Well, I'm interested in your working mules, and slowly the relationship starts to build up. And then people say, oh, well, you should go and look at that, or look at this. And as that relationship develops, then slowly the filmmaking process can begin. And you can see some of the situations. I'm going to show you a clip of this in a moment. Then, of course, into the brick factories, and then up into the high mountains following the mule's life. Let me show you a clip from this. I've got I think it's 4 or 5 minute clip, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about how the project was used for positive change. this is an ethnographic film which documents a story, but without, there's no narration, there's no non-diegetic music, there's no music thrown over the top of it. As my interpretation of a situation. It's presenting things as they are. I mean, the soundscape is crafted and there are many different levels of Foley sound even being used in there authentically from that location to enhance the soundscape. That film was then screened multiple times within the many diverse communities that are involved in the mule's life, from Meerut all the way through Nepal, Ganj, Kathmandu and up into the mountains. And it was used as a self-reflective tool so that it allowed participants to actually see themselves and their mules on screen, to actually step back from their lives and see themselves in a different way. Think about Paulo Freire's critical consciousness idea. They saw parts of the mules' lives that they'd never seen before, and this is really important. That communities in Nepal Ganj, they never see what happens to a mule in the high mountains, which part of this film also depicts. Or they never see where the mules are bred and reared, where they come from. They only see their little bit of the story, and the only connecting thing between all these diverse communities are the mules that pass through them over the course of their lives. And that's really important because that allowed people to develop a much greater sense of who or what their animals were, who they were as living things. And they saw their own attitudes and behaviours to their mules on the screen. And focus groups discussions were facilitated by an NGO called Animal Nepal and their community outreach team. And it developed what I've described Paulo Freire's critical consciousness. People made their own observations, they questioned themselves and each other, and it promoted an ongoing discussion and dialogue within their community. And then with Animal Nepal's outreach team's support, the communities actually produced a set of guiding principles to redefine their relationship with their mules going forward. And this was actually summed up in these 5 different areas. So, let's see the screen there. Keeping equines free from hunger and thirst, keeping equines free from discomfort, keeping equines free from pain, injury and disease, keeping equines free from fear and distress, and allowing equines to express their normal behaviour as animals. The focus group discussions were recorded. We also used rating scales with people to get a sense of what knowledge they felt they had before and after participating in this project. And that was all documented. And it showed really important changes in people's perceived knowledge and their attitudes towards their own animals. And it redefined their relationship with their animals. So as a filmmaker, you can see from these 2 examples, I'm often, when I'm working and engaged in social change, I'm working very closely in collaboration with communities and with NGOs as well, and with sociologists. The films that I produce are very seldom just standalone films. They're usually for a context, for a reason. I do, maybe with a little bit of re-editing, put them into film festivals sometimes, so they can be seen by a wider audience, but that's not the primarily motivation factor for the films that I produce. Evidencing the impact of our work is extremely important, and I want to emphasize that strongly, that as filmmakers that are interested in social change, it's not enough just to make a film and sit back in a self-congratulatory manner and say, great, my film's in a film festival. So what if it's not actually producing some sort of tangible social change in some way? So there's an article, an academic paper which goes into this project and the underlying methodologies in much more detail. You can find it at this link if you're interested in having a look at that. And I'd like to just give you this last example here called Community Voices, which is a participatory communication case study. I lived full-time in Nepal from 1990 to 1995. And in 1994 I instigated a participatory communication initiative with inner city youth groups in Patton. I was quite young at the time, but even then, really uncomfortable with the top-down approaches to communication that my NGO was using. I was intrigued by Paulo Freire's ideas and concepts of participatory communication, and I wanted to explore those in real life. And this project lasted a whole year, and it followed this process. Through the Lalitpur municipality, I established connections with 2 urban youth groups, based around libraries actually, one in Guji Bahal and one in Nag Bahal. The 2 groups worked independently from each other, but they both used photography initially to document their own community, looking for issues or themes of importance to them as young people. Digital cameras didn't exist at the time, so everything was shot on film and developed. And then they used their photographs as discussion material, laying them out on the floor, talking them through, slowly grouping the photographs into collective ideas and themes. And over the course of about 4 weeks, they slowly narrowed down their themes until they felt they had common ground around the most important issue affecting them collectively as a group of young people in their community. And in Guji Bahal, that was teenage girls. They were mostly teenage girls in this group. Teenage girls being married, not being allowed to continue in school or go to college or to seek employment or to have a career, and also the different treatment of daughter-in-laws to daughters within a household. And in Nag Bahal, it was the abuse of alcohol and domestic violence in the home, which often influenced young people and teenagers who then ended up on the street drinking themselves because they didn't want to be in their house because it was prevalent with domestic violence. So, having decided on their theme, each group then spent a number of weeks investigating their issues. They invited relevant specialists to come and talk to them. They spoke with community leaders, with sympathetic elders, and through this process, they built up community support and a support network of people around them. And that led to action. So each group then decided the best way to use participatory communication actions to present these issues within their community to create dialogue, hopefully leading to some sort of positive change. And in Guji Bahal, they decided to do a street drama, and in Nag Bahal, they decided to make a television drama and then screen it through a local cable television network that an entrepreneur had actually set up within their Bahal. Facilitators were brought in to support each group, script writing and testing of their scripts, acting, setting up street theatre, filming, editing, and so on. Each group faced significant challenges along the way. Many people, well, some powerful people in their communities did not want them to work on these projects because they were very happy with the power imbalance and they didn't want that to be changed. The power balance, sorry. They didn't want their role in society to be changed. Old men drinking, playing cards didn't want people questioning their behaviour, and so on, and so on. So it took genuine determination and collective strength to proceed. But they did proceed. They presented their drama and their street drama. Let me just play you a little clip from the film element of it. Anyone here know Ashish Mala? Ashish, yeah? You'll see a young version of Ashish Mala.
In our society, almost everywhere, parents are being drunk, and they create conflict everywhere. In the outside of the home or in their home, they create almost all the time when they are drunk, conflict.
Actually, this is the shooting, and we are doing a video. We are making a video film, and this is third day of the shooting, and almost I think 75% of the shooting is complete. Now all are here engaged. All are artists. They are artists. They are writers. They are everything, and they are doing themselves.
Our friends who are abusing the drugs, they have very problem. Our community have very problem of drugs. Who are suffering. Our parents are also suffering from children because they use drugs.
Local cable TV networks have been set up in these communities. People pay a small subscription to receive a cable. Extended families often gather together, and even those people who do not have a TV set of their own watch with their friends and neighbors. The youth groups pre-tested their scripts by inviting members of the community to their meetings. They explained the purpose of the media and read through the script. The comments and suggestions made by community members were incorporated into the script. Specialists, such as a drug social worker, were also invited to a pre-testing meeting. In this way, participants involved their local community in the media planning and increased their own knowledge about local social issues.
I help as an expert. I teach them how to write the script, what is the direction, what is the acting, how to act. And when I teach, now I think all are expert, and they are doing themselves.
So they presented their drama through street drama and then through this local cable TV network. And then over the next few weeks, they facilitated focus group discussions within their community where they brought people together and talked about the film, talked about their drama, and brought the issues out into the open. Talked to parents, talked to elders. And the discussion then spread beyond the focus groups and it permeated into the wider community, and people were talking about these things through the rest of their daily lives, not just during the focus groups. And an impact assessment specialist conducted interviews at the time, one-on-one interviews, to try to get a sense of the real tangible impact within those communities, and that was measured using different sociology tools. Community members stated the issues presented reflected the reality of their community and that they were legitimate concerns that needed to be addressed. Community members said they learned new things. The levels of increased self-confidence within participants were noticeable. An increased sense of belonging and cohesion for participants, feeling better supported within their community. And the reason I showed you that is this was 28 years ago. In July this year, I went back to Nag Bahal and Guji Bahal. And how am I going to engage with these people? Could I find any of these original youth who are now grown up with their own children? I went with a colleague, Deepak, and we went to Nag Bahal and saw a couple of guys, and I was trying to explain, and it was a bit hard. And then a guy pulled up on a motorbike, and as soon as he took his helmet off, he said, "Michael." And I said, "Navin." And after 28 years, he still knew my name and I knew his name, which was very indicative for me of the project as a whole. Next week, we're now having a reunion, 28 years later. We've made connections with about 2/3 of the original participants. Ashish Malla is coming, Om Mani Sharma. We've also made connections with Om Mani Sharma. The lady who did the evaluation for us, who was in her first job at the time, is now head of department in the British and Foreign Commonwealth office in the British Embassy. She's going to come and do the same evaluation process that she did 28 years ago. And we're going to look at the long-term social impacts. These girls challenge their parents. I don't want to be married. I want to find out what happened to them. What did happen to you after that project finished over the next few years, and 5 years, and 10 years? And now that you're a parent yourselves, how are you? I mean, I'm not going to ask this question outright, but I'm interested to know, how do you treat your own children based on your experience in your own youth? So, this, going back and finding out the impacts of the films that we make is incredibly important if we are going to be filmmakers for social change. You can look at this in your own time. This is the communication model that I developed based on this work in Pattern, a model of participatory communication that describes the process in a diagram that I've just talked you through. You can have a look at that in your own time if you like. To finish with then, if anybody's interested, I work at the University of South Wales in the UK, in Cardiff. I teach participatory, ethnographic, documentary filmmaking. I supervise PhD and master's students. We have a nice master's by research program available. So if anybody's interested in any of these areas, my email is there. Please feel free to contact me and I'll support you as best I can. So to finish with then, in summary, we've looked at the evolution of participatory communication in a very, very short, concise way. I've shown you some selected theoretical underpinnings of communication models. We've looked at 3 case studies. And I would just like to punch out this sentence here really as my main conclusion, that making a film is not enough if we want to be a catalyst for social change. There's fantastic films in this film festival, but so what if they don't actually bring about social change? It's a human rights film festival. We want to see change in our society as a result of the work that we do. We must think very carefully about how we engage with our subjects. Think about that diagram, internal to external. Where do we position ourselves in relation to our subject matter? And what methodologies do we do? Do we take participatory methodologies? Sometimes, perhaps. We don't have to always work in participatory ways. We can do good work in other places along that spectrum, but we must be critically aware of where we are positioning ourselves and know the difference between making a film about something and facilitating people to make a film about themselves. Different things. And then we've looked at how we can use our films to engage society and create